All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shots Fired podcast. We are really excited for today's guest. We brought into you from LA, Matt McNicholas with McNicholas and McNicholas Law Firm. Matt, thank you so much for flying into town, being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
I'm very happy to be here and to discuss all these issues. Very important.
And we do have a lot of issues to discuss that we guarantee you probably don't know about. So make sure you guys stay tuned for this full episode because this is jam-packed with information that potentially could save your career and your quality of life as a first responder. So do not click off this video. Matt, can you please give everybody a little bit of bio about yourself, what you do with your law firm, and how you ended up here today?
Sure. I practice employment law in Los Angeles, actually all over the state. We've represented first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, sheriff's deputies, etc. for the last 25 years. I've probably spoken to 3,000 or 4,000 police officers. We talk to 15 or 30 a week, and it's all on employment issues. So your listeners, viewers, understand labor is your MOU needs to be renegotiated, or you're being interviewed by IA and you have a rep there. That's labor. Employment is I'm being discriminated because I'm white, I'm black, I'm gay, I'm straight, or I'm not getting the promotion because I'm a whistleblower. That's employment. And right now we have about 45 or 50 cases pending up and down the state against various agencies.
What are some of the agencies that you've represented or taken on?
So, right, we represent the officer, Whittier PD, San Diego PD, LA PD, LA County Sheriff, Orange County Sheriff, LA County Fire, LA City Fire. We go to trial a week from, the 2 Mondays from now against LAPD in another case, and then Santa Barbara Sheriff. It's just up and down the state.
And some of these stories that you're going to share with us are absolutely going to blow your guys' mind with some of these cases that Matt's firm has taken on. So stay tuned. This video is brought to you guys by TAC Ops. Thank you, TAC Ops, for all your support. Mark and I teach at all the TAC Ops conferences. Make sure you guys go to swatconference.org or tacticalconference.org. There are 3 conferences a year: Nashville, Washington, D.C., New York. We'll be there teaching our classes. All the instructors that go to these conferences are top-notch. So if you guys want top quality training, go to tacticalconference.com or swatconference.org. Get signed up. You will not miss out.
Yep. And Kyle and I, we just got back from Santa Clara, California, where we are working with the Savage Training Group. We're instructors, and we just taught Patrol Survival Tactics class. Go to the savagetradinggroup.com, get signed up, and look at the additional classes that are offered across the country. And also keep an eye out for our class because we're coming across the country to help you guys out as well.
All right, so let's jump into this because a lot of this information we were talking before the podcast here. Before we get into that, Mark, how's your day going so far?
Well,
let's tell everybody how your day started.
I kind of feel like you're purposely walking into me and I know what you're doing. It started out actually pretty good, though I never really put a lot of thought into my attire, and I showed up here at the studio with a worn out t-shirt and then quickly realized that that's not appropriate.
So we had to go to Ross. Mark had to go buy a polo because Matt, you're here. We wanted to represent you well. And so that was like later on down the road, but early in the morning at 4 when you woke up to go hunting, which I didn't know that you were doing today.
It's opening season in California, the D zone for hunting.
Yeah. And then that didn't work out well for you. You came home, you're trying to get ready for this podcast and you bit your lip.
I did bad enough where I was spitting blood out and it's swollen on the inside of my mouth.
He cried, called me panicking. He's like, I might have a lisp. My lip is swollen. So there was a lot going on this morning for Mark before all this.
Yeah. And Kyle, as generally a micromanager as he is, generally we communicate on attire, and today he purposely left that out.
So
and this is where we're at.
Okay, good teamwork.
Yeah. Matt, welcome to this.
Yeah. And our honorary producer, Paul, who's your assistant, who's here in the background, you guys can't see, but Paul, we appreciate you.
Headphones on and all.
Yeah.
Giving us a thumbs up left and right.
Okay, so let's get into this. So, Matt, share your wisdom with everybody and what you do.
All right, I'd be happy to. So let's start off with ticket quotas in the state of California. It's actually in the vehicle code, California Vehicle Code 41600. So for your viewers and listeners, 41600, look it up. 41602 and 41603. 41600 defines, it's actually an arrest quota. So we always just say ticket quota, but it's actually arrests. And it defines an arrest quota as any requirement concerning the number of arrests or citations or the proportion of your arrests or citations compared to anyone else. So let's think about that, right? Any requirement, and as we were talking at lunch, any requirement is more. Write me more tickets than you did yesterday, and you can bang out early. Mm-hmm. That's a requirement. They just specified. Any requirement could be just write the little old ladies' tickets because we know they're the worst drivers. That's any requirement. And you can see how the legislature wanted it to be so broad because it includes arrests. Could you imagine if you said just go out and arrest X, Y, or Z? That's all we're concerned about? And you picked a race or an ethnicity or a gender or a sexual orientation? That's why it's so broad. So it's any requirement. And something I see all the time is comparisons. At the end of evaluations, there's often these little recap charts, and it says what you were, and then it has like the watch average or the unit average. That comparison is a ticket quota.
Interesting.
Wow.
Okay. So that's step one. Step two, 41602, says that no agency that employs police officers can have any policy regarding ticket quotas. So let's put those together. Any policy regarding any requirement of the number of citations or the proportion of citations you write. That, if there is such a policy, violates the ticket quota law. That's a problem. And I've spoken to CHP officers. I just finished a trial I'll tell you about against Riverside PD with a $2.85 million verdict on behalf of a Riverside motor officer. I represented a dozen LAPD motors, a handful of Whittier. They weren't motors, they were motors and patrol officers. And nobody knows this except the officers, right? The guys who are writing the tickets, they're out doing it. They often like, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. And they look it up. You know, in the age of the Google machine, it's not that tough. You just look it up.
Yeah.
And with the people I spoke to, and this probably makes sense, is there's uniform pushback. That's not right. That's not a quota. We didn't give you a set number. Well, that's not what the vehicle code says. The vehicle code says any requirement, right? Like the basic speed law is it has to be a safe speed for all the attendant circumstances where you are. Depends on what the circumstances are. Is it raining? Is it dark? Is it light, right? So it's broad. It's any requirement. So now here's a question I also get. All right, well, what happens if my department, my sergeant, my supervisor, lieutenant, captain says, okay, I want you to go out and write, 15 tickets a day. That's a quota. If nothing happens to you, that doesn't mean there wasn't a quota. It just means that maybe you do or you don't have a whistleblower lawsuit, okay? So the next step, right? So we have the vehicle code, 41600, 41602. Any requirement can't have any policy, which let's take a quick footnote. You guys train. You guys have been through post. You guys have been through advanced post. You guys have been on the job. I know that you're retired, but departments have unwritten policy, custom, and practice, right? As we were talking about on the way over here, we were going through a hypothetical. Well, what happens? Your hypothetical was, what if you pull somebody over who's very nice, very compliant, identifies himself as having a concealed weapon permit and being armed? And you were asking me, and we were talking about, would it be okay to politely ask if you could hold the weapon? Well, there's unlikely any written policy in your department about that. But let's say you went back and you talked to your sergeant and he thought, hey, that's a great question. And up the chain, she or he went and they came back down and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Well, that would be an unwritten policy, right? There's unwritten policies and procedures in every police department. It's just you can't write everything down. Well, when you're doing firm grip, how do you do it? Where do you position yourself? How much is firm grip? Well, when do you use body weight? There's general parameters in post, right? And there's going to be general parameters that you're given at your given agency, but there's a lot of unwritten policies that you learn from your FTOs. Okay, so police officers out there, ticket writers, don't be swayed because the statute says policy, because now you have to apply the law to the real facts, and that is there's written and unwritten policies. And I got all the command staff in the Riverside PD trial. Of course they admitted that. You can't not admit that. So then it becomes, well, what if there's no punishment? Well, then that would be a conversation, let's say you called me, we would have about whether you have a lawsuit that's worth pursuing. So let's examine the last piece. Under the Labor Code, 1102.5, it's the whistleblower statute, right? There's two ways to be a whistleblower. So, Mark, you could, before you were retired, something could come out in roll call and you could stand up and say, I don't think we're allowed to serve search warrants like that. My recollection of the knock and announce, I don't know what the law is on knock and announce anymore, but back in law school we read those constitutional cases on knock and announce. I think we have to knock 3 times and wait 10 seconds. And your captain says, shut up and sit down. You're now a whistleblower, even though you didn't intend to be, because you're identifying what you believe to be a violation of law, right? You were, in my hypothetical, you were violating an application of the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. You're now a whistleblower. If you are retaliated against for that, get Mark off this detail. In fact, I don't want him here ever again. How dare he raise those issues? That's a whistleblower retaliation case. Right?
That stuff happens. I mean, that stuff happens because you get a guy that's outspoken, maybe knows more than the sergeant, lieutenant, or commander, whoever's running that scenario. I mean, guys do get retaliated against that because now ego comes into play, and a boss doesn't want to get shown up by probably a line level staff member. So I think that stuff happens probably more frequently than
I've seen it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and obviously I don't walk the beat.
I would have never thought I would never thought that, that guy's a whistleblower.
No.
So, but think about it. Why is there a whistleblower statute? Because the law wants to incentivize the following of the law.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll use an example where I'll use me as a hypothetical. My bookkeeper comes to me and we're doing taxes for my law firm, McNicholas and McNicholas. Excuse me. And she says, hey, Matt, we can't take all these deductions. The Internal Revenue Code doesn't allow for that. If I fired her for saying that, she's a whistleblower. Because she's identified what she believes to be a violation of law that I've asked her to violate. Not intentionally. I didn't go up to her and say, hey, I want you to violate the Internal Revenue Code. She's saying, hey, I don't think we can take these deductions. And if I then take an adverse action because she raised that with me, that's a whistleblower retaliation. So that's one form of being a whistleblower, which is you voice your opinion. Often comes up in roll call, and it often comes up in roll call on quotas, because that's where somebody says, hey, I think that's a quota. Mm-hmm. And just as you said, management's like, no, it's not. We didn't give you a specific number, so sit down. So that's one way of engaging in protected activity. The other way you could engage in protected activity is, let's say, I'm coming back to you, Mark, on the serving of the warrant, and your lieutenant, captain, whoever's running your cadre, your unit, your detail, says, I just want you to go kick the door in and get it done. And you're like, okay, lieutenant, we're on it. And then you do your tailgate debrief and you say, we're not going to do it like that. We're going to follow the rules. We are going to knock, we're going to announce, we're going to wait the 3, 4, 5 beats, and then the door goes in, okay? What you've just done is you've refused to follow what you believe to be an unlawful order, right, which is actually your duty. The orders that you follow are those that you believe to be lawful, right? You actually have an affirmative obligation as a peace officer to not follow what you reasonably believe to be an unlawful order. If your lieutenant then found out after the fact that you did it the way you did it, and you said it's because I thought we violated the law, that's also whistleblower protection. So either raising your hand in the back of the class and saying, I think, you don't have to say, I think that violates the law. There's not magic words. So back to the example, you said, hey, no, man, I think we got to knock 3 times really loud and give 5 seconds. I think that's what the law, you could say, I think that's what the law requires, or I think that's what it's required. I think that's what post requires. You're identifying what you believe the law is. The other way to have whistleblower protection status is to just refuse to follow what you believe is an unlawful order. And then if there's adverse employment actions after either of those, you have a whistleblower lawsuit. It just depends whether you want to bring it or not.
Wow, that's interesting. And how many cases are brought up? I mean, how many people, like cops, actually come to you, or I guess even firefighters or first responders with whistleblower type accusations?
At least half of the people.
No kidding.
So a good way to think of employment law is it generally falls into two buckets. The traditional protected class, right? I wasn't promoted. I was demoted. I was harassed because I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Asian, I'm half Hispanic, I'm Muslim, I'm Jewish, I'm Christian, okay? Those are the traditional ones. What I just talked about are the whistleblower statute under 1102.5. So those are the two big buckets. Half, if not more than half, are the whistleblower under 1102.5.
Do they know they're whistleblowers, or are they just coming to you for help saying, I said this and this is the retaliation?
So that's a really excellent question, because the general public has an understanding of what retaliation is, right? You know, your sister took your candy bar, you punched your sister in the arm. That's retaliation, right? When you're a little kid. I don't mean now.
Yeah.
When you're a little kid.
Kyle would still do that.
Okay.
But.
Done that.
So, but they come and say, hey, this happened, and then my department changed my watch and my rating went down. So they see acts and then negative actions against them. While it may be retaliatory, in order to be a true whistleblower case, you have to fit within what 1102.5 says is protected status. Again, identifying what you believe to be a violation of law or refusing to follow an unlawful order. So, for example, if your captain was a huge Steelers fan and you came in one day before you changed to start, and you came in a New England Patriots outfit, and he got all or she got all fired up and treated you badly and like shunned you because of that. Of course, that's ridiculous and poor management, but that's not retaliation within the meaning of the law. So the answer to your question is most coppers, most firefighters have a sense that something wrong has happened, that they didn't do anything wrong. And then I help them we take their facts and I help arrange that in a legal framework.
Okay. What else is one of the most common complaints that get brought to your office from officers or first responders?
So I would say over the last 5 to 10 years, disabilities, as defined in the law, injuries, ailments, is at the forefront. Police departments, fire departments loathe workers that they do not, or employees that they do not consider fully able-bodied. Hate them. They want to pension you off. They want to say they can't accommodate you. 4 of my last 5 trials have been the failure to accommodate. And LAPD has gone through a huge sea change since this new chief has come in, Mike Moore. He changed or attempted to change the policy at the beginning, I think it was 2019, where they took the blanket approach to we will not permanently accommodate an injured worker, which you can't say in an organization that big, right? So let's break this down. What are we talking about? So let's say, Kyle, you get in a TC, God forbid. And let's say as a result of that, you hurt your back and you end up having back surgery. And now that limits the amount you can lift because you have fixation, you have hardware in your spine. And it also could create issues of you doing forcible arrests. Let's say your orthopedist says I don't recommend you do forcible arrests anymore because I don't want this hardware to splinter your spine apart. Now, if you're going to lift weights, you've got to lift very much. So he gives you these restrictions, and you go back to your department and you say, okay, here's my restrictions. 95% of the departments out there will say you're gone. They're going to force you off on a pension.
Yep.
And while it may be permissible in some situations, it is not okay to say as a blanket rule that must happen. Because the law in the state is every employer must provide a reasonable accommodation. Of course, their defense is, well, it's not reasonable. All right, maybe that's true, but it's very fact intense. So let's use somebody else. Let's use Google, who has 20,000, 30,000 employees. And there's always something to be done at Google. And let's say they had somebody who was a typist, programmer, lost their right hand in an accident. Now they can't really do it. Well, just because they can't be a programmer anymore, Google could accommodate them as a personal assistant. Okay, you can't use both hands to type and because you can't program fast enough anymore, right? But we have 500 jobs here that need to be done. So now apply that to a police department. Okay, you can't go out and do forcible arrest. How many years on the job are you?
17.
Okay, 17. So you've been on for a minute. You've got lots of experience. You could work in the watch commander's office. You could work as the chief's adjutant.
Please no.
Okay. But just kidding. My point is, if you can't go out in the field and make forcible arrests, they can't just say, well, we're throwing you out. It's just not the law. Now, your agency is small, so their ability to accommodate will be far more difficult than LAPD. So, for example, LAPD, although they're understaffed, they're about 9,400 officers. Well, as you guys both know, when you arrest somebody, the amount of paperwork that is attendant to that arrest is hours. Mm-hmm. So what LAPD often does is, if you're light duty, they have you handle it so that the able-bodied officers can spend less time processing, right? So even if you say, okay, wait a second, what about after, in 2020, the George Floyd issues and LAPD goes to what they call A-Watch, AB, 12 hours, you're on 12 off, 12 on, 12. There are still 10% of the department is doing administrative stuff. You're running a command post. The command post has 25 people in it. You have multiple command posts. Well, you still have to process arrestees. So when the city's on that kind of tactical alert, there's a processing center. Well, they have 20, 30, 40, 50 administrative people there. The department needs administrative people, right? It just, particularly of that size.
Yeah.
And so the one thing, I know I'm giving your listeners a lot, but the one thing is don't accept the mantra that just because you get hurt, you absolutely have to pension off or leave. It is the employer's duty to accommodate. Who's your employer?
Well, we don't mention it on the show, but it's a local agency.
Okay,
right here.
sorry, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, but your employer's not the agency, it's the city.
Yeah.
And so the city has an obligation. Okay, well, let's say we can't reasonably accommodate you in the watch commander's office. There's something in the mayor's office. There's something over in the Department of Education.
Yeah.
So it's the broad rule that if you're hurt, which is much more prominent in small agencies, that you're out, is not comply with the law.
So, question, you brought up Google, being a programmer, loss of a hand. They could find something else for you to do. Is that loss of a hand at work, or what if you lost that hand outside of work?
Doesn't matter.
It's a reasonable accommodation.
It's a reasonable accommodation.
Got it. Nice.
Right?
Okay.
So, let's say you're just getting older. Let's say law enforcement was your second career and you slipped a disc.
So you hurt yourself at home working in your yard.
Correct.
They should be making a reasonable accommodation.
They have an obligation to make a reasonable accommodation. They don't have an obligation to make an unreasonable accommodation.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's say your agency only has 20 sworn. And your agency's like, we can't afford it. Well, I can't say that they're right or wrong because it would be a very fact-intense examination. So let's say, since he's retired, I'll go with him. So you call and you have 80 to 100 sworn in your agency, and you say, yeah, I had 18 years on and I got in a TC. We're using my same example. And they said they couldn't accommodate me. And I'd say, okay, well, let's talk about that. What kind of admin stuff goes on at your agency? Who does it? Is it all civilian? Is it civilian and sworn? Who's doing it? What's there to be done? There's always stuff to be done. We're always behind. We have to, submit these statistics to the state of California based on that's something that happens now, like arrest by race and ethnicity and what the first to do.
Yeah.
We're always behind on that. Well, okay. Why wouldn't they have you do that? And then I would ask you about that. Well, who's done it in the past? Why is no one doing it now? And reasonable accommodations could change. So they could, Mark, they could have you doing that, catching up on that database for 7 or 8 months. And at the end, I'd say, hey, we got something else we need you to do. We need you to roll over to the chief's office and deal with X, Y, and Z. Because we have we're going to file for a grant with the federal government to get extra tactical gear. And since you're light duty, you're going to write the grant. So The light duty position can change, right? So it's not, okay, once you get it, it's done forever. But back to the mantra is, just because your agency or your buddy or your partner says, oh, they don't have to accommodate you, that's not the law. The law requires a very in-depth factual examination.
Interesting. POA stuff, Police Officers Association.
Yes.
Jumping into that. That's a great topic.
Yeah, I want to know about that.
And why? Yeah, well, because I bring that up because you said smaller agencies. It would be more beneficial for smaller agencies to not have administrators in the POA or in the Police Officers Association. And you use the example of your wife doesn't like your high school best friend. The best friend is out, right? Correct. So talk about that. Talk about POA.
Okay, so let's start with the first POA I dealt with and still deal with, which is the Los Angeles Police Protective League. It's big. Their agency's big. You rank out of that POA once you get above lieutenant. So LAPD is police officer 1, but that's probationer. 2, 3, sergeant 1, 2, lieutenant 1, 2, captain 1, 2, 3, commander, deputy chief, etc. Once you get above lieutenant, you're out. And some people grimace at the fact that lieutenants are in the league, in the union too, because they're management. And lieutenants carry a lot of administrative responsibility at the LAPD. Okay. So, but the LAPD, they're a full-time, fully funded union. So if you're elected as a director, that's your new assignment. It'll say in your package, your personnel file, that you're assigned to the league. And you still get your paycheck, and you're still accruing time. It's a full-time job, right? So that's all they do. And they interact with officers. They actually have also things called league delegates. So the LAPD is broken down into geographical bureaus, which are 4 large geographical areas of Los Angeles, and in each one is a geographical division, police station. Each police station gets a director, but each police station has 400 or 500 sworn officers. That's a lot. Yeah. That's more than most agencies.
I was gonna say most agencies, yeah.
So there's no way for one director to be able to handle the issues for 400 or 500 officers. So they have delegates, which is a group of officers at each division, which will carry issues back and forth from the league to the division, right, to help facilitate this. But the league is in constant contact. Those directors are in constant contact every day with the department because there's so many issues. Because they try, and I've seen with some good success, they try and mediate disputes. Somebody's getting their watch shifted, they didn't like it, and so the director could get involved, and then they talk to the captain, and they go up the chain and things like that. But the league directors never turn state's evidence. They never side with the department. I've never seen it. Now, I'm not a copper, so my interaction with them is very limited in the sense that they have been supportive when I've needed to learn. So, for example, there's a special administrative order that came out in 2004. Well, that's a few years ago. There are people at the league who are like they're parliamentarians. Mm. And I can just call down and I can talk to a director and say, tell me about this. Well, that was Chief so-and-so, and we had a meet and confer, and the meet and confer lasted through the summer, and here's why we did that. So that I have some understanding, right? It's like a resource. It's like Wikipedia for the LAPD. But they don't turn state's evidence. Now, let's compare that to small agencies. Without fail, every smaller agency I have dealt with where I've had a employment client, there's always been an issue with the POA. Someone that the membership felt was too cozy with management. And then lo and behold, 3 years later after that board member at the POA, now all of a sudden they got promoted. And you can see how it happens. And so they're not, the smaller agency POAs, in my opinion, should basically not have supervisors in them because the promotion pool is small. If you only have 40 or 50 officers, the LAPD has hundreds and hundreds of sergeants. Yeah. Like the promotion pool is huge. It's not the guy on the POA or the other two that aren't on the POA, right? Doesn't even matter, right? So in this last case, in the Riverside PD case, there was somebody that was on the board at the relevant time. And our client said, yeah, he got voted out because he was playing both sides of the fence. All right, that was the client's opinion. But I hear that all the time, which is why when I represent officers from smaller agencies, the POA is not a resource. In fact, I would consider them, I have to treat it as more as whatever I would say to them would get taken back to management.
Okay, makes sense.
And hurt the legal case. The bigger agencies like the sheriff and LAPD, successful lawsuits help them not have to have lawsuits.
Yeah.
And I have heard that directly. I have had directors who I don't even know come up and say, I have been able to resolve 20 or 30 situations because of you. I'm like, what do you mean? Because I'll say, why do you want to go down that path with these people? It'll be a director. Say, I was talking to Deputy Chief Shivadababa, and we were having this discussion about what to do, how to resolve this issue. And I said, why do you want him to go to the McNicholas firm? Why don't we just do this here and move on? And this director told me 20, 30 times, let's just get this done and avoid litigation. And it is absolutely true. Because I've heard it over the last 20 years. So it is the paradox that they see the value that if someone like me is forcing on the department some level of reckoning, that it then makes their job easier to negotiate on the vast majority of smaller issues.
So with the POA, kind of breaking it down, since there's most agencies throughout California and across the country are smaller agencies, not LAPD big, you have some type of an issue that officer goes to their union, says, this is a problem I'm having. Can you help me? Then they later find out that union rep has gone and already talked with management or is doing something. Is that what you're talking about? Kind of playing both fields where that officer's interest is, and that's because the smaller agencies they're trying to promote, or like, why would they be playing two fields? I guess is my question.
Okay, so let's go with the first part. Yes, they will. Well, let me go talk to the chief, and then the person goes and talks to the chief and comes back and says, yeah, there's nothing we can do. What? What do you mean there's nothing we can do? Well, that's your job, is to do something, not to tell me that there's nothing we can do. So they'll soft sell it. And my experience and what I've seen has been because that's how they want to promote. So when you get to the bigger agencies, there's an oral board and there's 3 people and they rate it and it goes this, and you have like at LAPD, there could be 150 people on the next sergeant's promotion list that they pull from over 2 years until the list dies. But at your agency, Kyle, how many, you have sergeants at your agency? Mm-hmm. How many total sergeants in your agency?
I think 15.
Okay, not many. One geographical division at LAPD could have 20 or 30 sergeants. So what happens is I won't talk to the agency, the POAs. Like there's some officers saw our Instagram feed and contacted us and said, will you come do, because one of my posts was on POBAR issues. And she said, will you come do POBAR training for me and other officers at Long Beach? I said, sure. She said, okay, we can do it at the POA office. And I said, I won't do it there.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So what I'm getting from this is smaller agencies, if you feel or you think or you see those representatives kind of playing both fields, what is the option for that officer for help? If you have that, I need to take this to my union, but I feel like they're going to play the field and not look out for me, like, what's the option?
Okay. So now this gets into a very difficult set of circumstances. Being a police officer, being a firefighter, being a sheriff's deputy, being any type of first responder is an excellent job, as we were talking about. It's one of the few fields left in this country where you have defined benefit plans, a pension, right, which you get a percentage of, and lifetime health care. You're watching the auto workers are going through this strike. This is probably the last contract auto workers will have because of the rate of automation, right? Then when this contract, whatever they get this time, think about that, 5-10 years when it's done, the auto workers are going to be done.
Yeah, it'll all be.
Right, it's electric cars, and all you do is put the motor on the axle. Mm-hmm. So, but that's why am I saying this in response to your question? Because this becomes, and I talk to pretty much every client about this. Now this becomes a very personal issue. You now have to start weighing, how unbearable is this for me? Can I tolerate it or not tolerate it? How many years am I on the job? What is my ability to leave if the you-know-what hits the fan? And that becomes important at your point in the decision tree, and that is I've gone to my union, and it feels like, or my POA, technically not a union, gone to my POA, and I feel like they're not doing anything because they're too close with management. Okay, there's a fork in your road. The answer is you have to come to someone like me or do nothing. Those are your choices. And how about this? They both are probably undesirable choices. It's just a matter of which is more undesirable.
Yeah. What's the lesser of the two evils?
Correct. And it would be based on your situation. Let's say, Kyle, you came to me and you're a young copper and you've only got 8 years on and you're newly married and you just bought a house and you've got 2 kids under the age of 4. Oh. I would say you have very little to play with in that hand of cards. So grin and bear it. It's not worth your risk. I would tell you that because that's what I would want somebody to tell me were I in your shoes, right? I view it when being a lawyer, being a good lawyer is like being a good doctor. Bless you. You tell me your symptoms and I got to tell you what's wrong with you. I can't sugarcoat it. I can have a good bedside manner, but I will always put it back to you. Okay, what's going to happen? If you said to me, Matt, I can't take it, I can't bear it, I've got to do something, then I'd say, okay, then let's keep talking. But I would then tell you what the difficulties of litigation, even if you have a dead bang great case, right? You're in a small agency. Okay, how many people are going to side with you and how many people aren't?
Yeah, not a lot are going to side with you.
Well, at least not
for their own protection. Privately, they're probably going to, but publicly, not. They're not going to. For their own reputation.
And as we were talking over lunch, this copper at Riverside PD, so shout out to my boy Sean, Motor Sean, okay? I hope
Sean, we got to get, remind me, we have a good sticker for you.
Okay.
Give Matt to bring back for you.
Yes.
Okay, Sean, what this means is you have to get 30 more listeners to their podcast. All right. Yeah.
By tonight.
Which is a quota.
Very good.
I'm catching on.
But we're not covered under the vehicle code, so we're good.
Yeah, whatever.
So he said to me after we got the verdict, I texted him the next day, I gave him a hug and he was in tears in the courtroom. And he couldn't stop crying. And he said, I'm vindicated. Because of the pandemic, this case had been pushed, right? It got filed in 2019.
Ugh.
So I said, okay, go home. I said, just be king for the day. Go home and let this trial wash off you. I said, it's going to take a week for you to decompress. And so I checked in with him the next day. I got on a plane the next day with my wife to Europe. And then when we landed in London, I texted him and I said, well, and he said, I've gotten hundreds of texts. My phone's blowing up. This is to your point. He said, from people I haven't heard from in 10 or 15 years. I said, well, where were these guys when you were going through the litigation? He said, he texted a few expletives and said, exactly. Yeah. Where the blah, 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 blank were they?
Have the courage and stand up for the people that work with you, that protect you on the street.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's tough. Yeah. I mean, and then, you're talking leadership now, right? There's a lot of folks and organizations that they're not going to do that because they know their reputation's on the line and they have a career that they want to build. And that's the sad thing about leadership is too many people are way too weak to just stand up for what's right.
And you know what? The few that do stand up, hands down, I applaud every one of them. Yeah. Matt, you have this was super interesting talking about POAs and the options that you have, but You have a really interesting case about officers, medics.
The shaved eyebrow.
The shaved eyebrows. I was picturing something. I was trying to get it out there. I just couldn't. Shaved eyebrows.
Okay.
Ink pins on faces or wherever.
We won't share the conversation that was had in the car that Mark thought about this case.
Okay, so we got a verdict earlier this year on behalf of 2 male officers. And the reason I found the case noteworthy to talk to you about is because everybody, particularly in law enforcement and particularly firefighters, I mean, I would say that police departments around the state look like the Rainbow Coalition as compared to fire departments. Fire departments are still about 40 years behind. We'll get into that later. So this was a verdict on behalf of 2 males who were discriminated against based on their gender. So all of your listeners don't think of it that way. Gender discrimination is gender discrimination. If I don't hire you, if you want to hire you, let's say you retire, you want to come work for my firm, and I say I don't want to hire any men, and I don't have a legitimate business reason, you could sue me for that. I can't make the decision based on gender unless there's a legitimate business reason. Okay, what's a legitimate business reason? Excellent question, Mark.
So you're welcome.
So on the job, let's say you guys are part of a vice detail, right? Well, you need a female hooker. Well, that would be a legitimate reason to offer that position to only female officers as opposed to male officers. And now let's say you're in a part of town that has a specific ethnicity. So if, let's say, it's all Latino, and a white hooker would stick out like a sore thumb and have cop written all over their forehead. Well, that would be a legitimate business reason for you to recruit your target, whatever you call that person, based on race, ethnicity, and gender. Okay, those are rare circumstances. So anyway, these 2 coppers, it's Glick and Garcia, the 2 Gs, but they weren't partners. They did work in the same division. Shoot and Newton, which I gave you that skateboard you'll show your viewers at some point.
Yeah.
And they each had a female partner. Only knew each other in passing. There's a car accident. Guy's drunk. He's vomiting on himself. The rescue ambulance responds, and they call for police. And so Garcia and his female partner show up first, and there's a bunch of witnesses, and they realize we're going to have to canvass this place for a long time. I need some help. So he put out radio traffic for assistance, not backup, assistance. Okay. So Glick and his female partner show up, and Garcia, who's the senior officer and first to the scene, it's his scene. So the younger, more junior Glick says, what do you want me to do? He says, okay, just get the suspect, cleaned up, get him into the back of your car while we talk to some people. Okay, so that's all caught on body when everything's great. And he has his eyebrows and his mustache. All right, so later, that suspect is transported back to the station. And at LAPD, I don't know if your agency is this, but they have digital in-car video, which always records into the car. So you can see like the suspect, he's like in the back like that, and like kind of like that green, you're watching an Iraq war movie, that kind of
old.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And like you see him like throws up on himself again. It's awful. Thank God there's no sound. Yeah. Anyway, so then about 7 or 8 officers take the suspect out. They start to process him. They put him in the drunk tank. And Glick and his female partner, they're out. They're back in the field. They were at the station for a total of 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Garcia and his partner were there for several hours because they were processing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, at some point, he passes out in the cell and vomits again and passes out. They call a rescue ambulance. He's taken to the hospital. Mind you, there was no officer that rode in the back of the RA, which was a footnote because there was supposed to be. But the paramedics said, don't worry about it. He's passed out and he's cuffed to the gurney. Like, look, great. Don't want to ride back there anyway.
Yeah.
But those are 2 different officers that are neither Glick nor Garcia. Okay. A day and a half comes back. A day and a half goes by, and the suspect comes in and files a complaint that his eyebrows were shaven off, his mustache, that they drew somebody drew with a brown Sharpie, eyebrows, and a mustache, a Hitler mustache, okay? And then drew a penis on his stomach, and then he had a tattoo that said pride, Pride, and they wrote puto, which is not a flattering word in Spanish, particularly if you're using it for a gang member. So we filed a complaint, and the LAPD took it very seriously, which I agree. And they did a lengthy investigation, but almost immediately they focused on Glick and Garcia and excluded the focus on their female partners. They took them out of the field almost immediately, let the female partners stay in the field. They then decided, because I looked at the internal affairs investigation, scoured it for weeks. I mean, I have notes and everything on it. Well, they get a search warrant. I mean, you know, and your listeners know, the general population doesn't know, but getting a search warrant for a police officer on duty is a big deal. They got a search warrant for their person, their personal locker, their personal vehicle. Right? So they go and they snip the lock off and they open it because they're looking for physical evidence, right? Which, can we footnote this, is moronic, because by the time they did it, it was a month and a half later and the complaint had been pending. And if anybody who has more than 3 functioning brain cells said, oh, there's a complaint pending, I might want to get rid of the Sharpie in my locker. Like, it was so stupid that they waited as long as they did. It had no evidentiary value.
Yeah, because the officers knew they were being investigated,
right,
or that a complaint had come forward.
Well, and the complaint identified basically anybody who was on duty at the station at Newton. It identified like 18 people. But
no secret.
But they, and they focused right in but on Glick and Garcia and not their female counterparts. And the search warrant happens, and they're benched. And then what the notes showed, because I got the chrono from the investigation, is that command tried to have additional search warrants written and served on the males, not the females.
Additional,
because they thought, they got replacement phones because they took their phones, right? Because they wanted to take all the evidence off. So they got replacement phones, which they have to have. And they did exactly what they're supposed to do, which is they told the department what their number was, because that's policy to LAPD. You have to have your cell phone numbers. You have to tell the department your cell phone numbers and your home numbers. And if you get a new one, you have to tell them immediately, which both of them did. And so command's like, okay, good, get a search warrant because maybe they're using their new phones to communicate about the crime. I'm like, I'm reading this, and I'm like.
And that was signed?
It's in the chrono, because the notes are taken in the chrono, because I'm like, are you moronic? So wait, they go get new phones, and they tell you about them. And now they're going to text about something they did? So then there was notes that said the city attorney kept saying, you won't get it, you won't get it, you won't get it. So then it got more insidious. Then after about the 4th time, the city attorney or the DA said, you're not going to get it.
Get what? Just
get the search warrant. There's no judge that's going to sign off on this after you've done all this other stuff because you think, right?
So the investigators were trying to get a search warrant. They were multiple times.
The command told the investigators brought the question to an attorney, and the attorney said, you're not going to get it. So they just stopped. So then what command said is, okay, seek a warrant on the 2 males again, and the 2 females this time, and ask for the firefighters as well, which was a way to camouflage it to get the 2 males again. And how do I know that? Because the Superior Court judge said, no on Glick and Garcia again, absolutely out of it. No on the firefighters, and you can have the females. And they didn't confiscate their phones. They didn't search their lockers, and they didn't search their private vehicles.
So you have a judge signing a warrant a search warrant telling you to take those cell phones, and then they purposely...
Well, I would say giving you permission to, right? That's what a search warrant says. You say, hey, Your Honor, here's my sworn declaration. Here are the probable cause facts. Will you give me permission under the 4th Amendment to go do X, Y, and Z? And he said, fine. Not the 2 male coppers, not the firefighters. But they did nothing with it. And
that's crazy.
Now, okay, it gets better. It gets better. The material they included in the probable cause declaration for the males specifically excluded inculpatory statements for the girls. Meaning it was a statement they relied on. That, getting into the weeds here a little bit, but Glick says to his female partner, I am thinking other stuff. Let's wait till the senior, which was Garcia, gets here. Boom. Oh, he said, and I'll talk to you when we're off. I'll talk to you when we're off, meaning he'll talk to his female partner when we're off video. When they put that phrase in the first search warrant, they left off the, and I'll talk to you when we're off. Right? Because if they were relying on that to give probable cause, like, oh, maybe he's talking about like they're going to shave his eyebrows. They left off the sentence that said, I'm now going to talk to the female about it when we're off the recording. Well, why would you exclude that? I mean, it's one statement.
Wow.
Okay? And there were things that appeared in a final search warrant that they knew before the first search warrant was ever done, but never included because it would have been a basis to go after the women. It was just, okay, so you're like, okay, well, this is complicated. They were following the evidence. Well, one of the league directors got involved as this sordid tale was spinning out of control, and he talked to one of the deputy chiefs who was the chief's right-hand man, and that deputy chief said to this director, come on, Bob, not his name. The chief, we all know this is stuff that only boys do and not girls, and that's the chief's position.
Jeez, not something you can say.
And so, right. So now this director is apoplectic. And, of course, he reports this to these guys, and they're apoplectic. And so
and here comes you.
Right. Okay, so then here comes
Really?
But the director, now we're back to POAs, right? He had the bit between his teeth. I've never seen a small POA do this. So he started to go out and find his own information. He happened to have a neighbor that was a fire captain. Says, oh, yeah, paramedics do that shit all the time. And he's like, okay. And then he happens to be at a picnic where he bumps into another friend of his, not his neighbor, that's a fire captain with LAFD, who used to work internal affairs at LAFD. And that fire captain told the league director, his phrase was, it's a deep, dark rumor that paramedics will do that to in-custody suspects, drawing them with Sharpies and shave stuff off. And so the director hears this, and he calls the deputy chief back and says, hey, here's what I found out. What I just told you. And the fire captain is willing to talk to you. Chief, will you talk to him? Chief said, to his credit, yes. A week later, the chief calls back the league director and says, I talked to the fire chief. It carried the day. We're going to pull back the discipline. Because at this point, they were ordering the two males to a board for termination. And they just kept going. And even though they didn't find anything, right? So after the investigation, IA said, we can't determine who did this. And it went up the chain of the command, and the Office of the Chief of Police rejected that and ordered the two males to a board of rights for termination. That's how you do it in the LAPD. So at the LAPD, you don't get your civil service hearing after the discipline. You get it before. Yeah. Okay? So, because your listeners are like, what the heck's going on? So at the LAPD, they say, we're going to send you to a board of rights for termination. They don't terminate you. Then you go to the board, you have your civil service hearing, and that board determines whether you're fired or not. That's how it works. So
even though IA said we don't have anything,
I said we don't know. It could be any of these people. And then they had a chart. Well, this was their opportunity, and the people who had the least amount of opportunity were Glick and his female partner.
Because they're there for 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yeah. That is, it's crazy following this story that this even happened, but go ahead.
Okay, but then when the chief is ordering them to a board, he refines the allegation. So originally it was, shave the eyebrows, et cetera, et cetera. The allegation for the board was assault under color of authority or knew who did it. Like,
yeah, where'd that come
or
from?
knew who did it. Well, okay, by that logic, then so did the girls. If you sent them all and said, look, somebody did it, the board's going to figure it out. There's no gender bias. It's stupid, but there's no gender bias. But with that director, this is kind of tying in what we were talking about before. Had we not had him, that would have been a difficult case to win. And if he had not been dogged, if he had not stayed on the case and been willing to step into a courtroom under oath and just, boom, yeah, this is what Chief said his name. This is what he said. I told him that's moronic. And that's the difference between that POA director basically saved their professional lives.
And then same with the fire captain for having the courage
Right.
to come in and actually talk.
Right. So
who who drew on this guy and who shaved him?
Yeah, so finish the story.
Yeah.
Someone's on the edge of their seat, like, well, what happened?
I don't have any more edge to sit on.
Nobody admitted it, but it's got to be the the paramedics. Why? Because paramedics have the materials to shave you, right? So if you're in cardiac arrest and they have to shave your chest, they have that there.
Yeah.
Or if they give you medication, they'll write it.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't, like if they gave you some type of pain medication that's a narcotic, and they want to make sure that the ER, the emergency room knows so they don't double up the dose, they'll write it on your body. The dose, the time, and what they gave you.
Yeah.
And this is what this director kept saying from the beginning, even before he got the fire cam. He's like, who has the tools to do this? The paramedics. And they told the officer that he didn't need to ride. They had 15 minutes alone. So there are two takeaways now from that is gender discrimination is gender discrimination. Your male listeners can be discriminated against based on their gender under the law, just as your female listeners can be discriminated based on their gender. And the power of the POA. If this was a smaller agency, I mean, the case was still winnable, but that evidence was so powerful. And we interviewed all the jurors afterwards, and they identified how powerful that evidence was.
Did the paramedics or anybody, did they ever get investigated for, whether or not they did it on their behalf, on their...
They were interviewed, but they denied it, of course,
Yeah.
because then they'd be admitting misconduct.
Yeah.
But don't forget, this is an LAPD investigation. They can't compel or lie-barger a fire department. Even though it's the same city, these are two agents, different agencies. And so internal affairs at LAPD has no jurisdiction or power over LAFD.
That is sickening. Well, honestly, that whole story is sickening. The fact that a first responder would even do that. Like, I honestly, like, it doesn't matter what you're in custody for, but even just I get a DUI and the guy's puking all over himself. He's unconscious. And then you got, I guess we can't point the finger, but hypothetically, if the medic is in the back, they do have razors back there because I worked on an ambulance. So they do have shaving razors to be able to do what you said. Shaving eyebrows off and taking Sharpies and drawing that crap on, like, that's just, I almost like can't even believe, like, if you didn't tell me that story and you weren't who you were and I heard that just from some random person, I'd be like, that didn't happen.
And here's the extra one. One of the first things that my client said when they're telling me the story to the investigators, well, go, there's cameras in the cell, go pull it. And the investigator said, oh, they're broken. But the significance of that is the officers didn't think they were broken and didn't know they were broken. And the only time that the shaving could have occurred while in custody was in that cell. Because the video, the in-car video, remember I said he was in the in-car and them, and they have the officers pull him out? You can still see his eyebrows, so they're intact. So he gets into the station at Newton, and he is almost immediately put in the holding cell. And there's a bunch of people, like the watch commander there, the assistant watch commander's there, because they have to go take pictures of the body, right? The person, so that if the person claims, they roughed me up, right? It's a standard procedure. You take pictures all around to say, okay, there's no marks, there's no this, there's no that. And so these officers thought that didn't know the cameras weren't working.
Yeah. It could be a fake camera, and I would assume, you should assume you should operate, even if the camera isn't there, that you're being watched. That's just integrity.
It underscored how these guys didn't do anything but a gender bias and put their lives and their careers on the precipice of complete disaster. Because what happens if a panel at the LAPD says, because it's guilty, not guilty at a board of rights. That's how it works. They don't say sustained, not sustained. It's guilty, not guilty. And I understand it's not the same as a criminal standard, but if the count is assault under color of authority, in the criminal world, if proven, that's a felony.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That is a major big deal. And so does that then have a prosecutor, well, my God, that this is their own investigation and they're doing this against their own officer, I should really look at this. That's what I call was Damocles' sword. That old, I think it's a Greek tragedy where the guy, everybody thinks he's got everything and he's looking up and there's the sword hanging by a string and that his weight's going to fall on him. And Garcia was in a better position because, he was 20 plus years on and, his house was almost paid for and his kids were out of the house. Glick had a newborn when this was happening. And his pension wasn't vested. If they had to cut Garcia loose, at least he got his pension because he was over 20 years. And as your listeners are wondering, why wouldn't they just leave? LA Police and Fire have their own pension system. They're not CalPERS, so that's not portable. So you're stuck.
Yeah. Gosh. So both officers, what happened? They go back to work?
They went back to work, and they too got the texts from everybody around the department. And having done this for so long, my first LAPD case, I was a baby lawyer. I started working on it in 1998 or 99. That was my first LAPD case, 24 years ago. I represented the first black member of the K-9 unit, and he was OG K-9. By that, they meant he was part of the group of guys that actually started the K-9 unit at LAPD. They wrote the SOP, everything.
Wow.
That was my first. Carol Broussard, if you're out there, he lives in Texas now. So if you know Carol Broussard, AKA KB, still my favorite, Carol, because you were my first. I remember him with great fondness. I was such this bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, new lawyer, and you come out of law school and you read the cases and you think everything's so black and white, and he would tell me stories as we were getting ready for trial. And, it was stunning to me. And it's not stunning to me anymore, but things that happened on the job. And I've been doing this for so long. His son is now on the job, who has consulted with me as a lawyer.
Wow.
As I was telling you in the car, I'm on my 5th city attorney and my 6th chief of police.
And you said you're going to outlast them too.
Of course, I'll get on.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm only 51 years old. I got another 20 years of runway. That's like 3 or 4 more chiefs.
Yeah.
We were talking about it on the way over here. A lot of these issues that come up in departments, whether cops are discriminated, harassed, and you can tell us the legal definition of, what is harassment, because that gets thrown around a lot. But we all agreed that it honestly comes down to a lack of training. Like, we all agreed on that. Cops and law enforcement are just so behind the freaking 8 ball of education. And like I mentioned it on the way over here, not 1 ounce of any of this was ever talked about or trained becoming a police officer. And here cops are going out there and making life-altering decisions for people. And like, none of this ever gets talked about in the academies or, hey, if you're wronged on this, like, these are your rights and what you can do. I know we have Police Officers Bill of Rights, and you mentioned it, POBAR, but
so important, by the way. And what you're talking about now, okay, we're shifting to this. And
are we downshifting or upshifting?
Well, I'm never downshift.
All right, I like it.
Dude, we're going into third gear now.
Let's go.
You're getting me in trial mode. This is just like, I have good singularity of focus. So there's a lot of things here. As you just said, Kyle, when coppers get to me and, as I tell them, I said, I'm a wuss, man. My biggest job risk is getting a paper cut, not getting shot at. So I'll tell you what, when someone breaks into my house, I'll call 911 and you come. But when you're being harassed, retaliated, you call me and I'll respond.
I like that.
So it's true. It's like,
make that your slogan.
Well, when they get to me, I said, that's my slogan. And these men and women, and it's interesting, like these guys who are just huge and they just break down in tears in my office because finally somebody's listening to them, like really listening. Not just hearing, but listening, which when we have children, we learn the difference hearing and listening to our children, right? You're laughing. The things you learn as a parent. And they just didn't know anything, and it's not their fault because why would they? It's not like you see employment issues on TV, all you see is like criminal cop stuff, right? And so that's why after all these years, just in the last month or two, I hired a series of professionals to start an Instagram feed at First Responders Law with the specific and sole intent to get these little nuggets out there to police officers. It is an incomplete solution, but that's how I met you, because a former LAPD officer that I know saw it and he called me and said, you got to talk to these guys. You got to, they're getting their message out too. And it's working. So now here I am. One of the things that I have seen that's effective is at ALADS, the Association of Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs, ALADS. The LAPPL, the Police Protective League, they have something called panel counsel. I don't know if you've heard of this, where they vet, like, okay, let's take it away from cops. Every union worth its salt has resources for its members, whether the SEIU, whether you're a Teamster union, the meat packing union, whatever you are, there are resources. And every union that I had seen in the PI world, because my firm does a tremendous amount of PI, always had lawyers for their members to call. Lawyers that the union had nothing to do with other than had vetted. These are good lawyers, they're honest lawyers, they're gonna do what they say, and we vetted them, right? It's like, the Martha Stewart good housekeeping seal. Well, ALADS and LAPPL does it. That's how they asked me years ago to be a panel lawyer. And I said, okay, I'll be happy to do it. Because in their monthly publication and online, they have panel lawyers for various subjects. Divorces, wills, IOD lawyers. We got to talk about that too. IOD lawyers.
Explain, what does IOD stand for?
Oh, injured on duty. Sorry. Or comp.
Yeah,
IOD. That's
just so everyone knows.
I brought a SoCal term up. Okay. Sorry. IOD, injured on duty. And then they have employment discrimination, right? And so what the union will do, somebody calls up the union. I call up, I'm Officer McNicholas, and I call up my director. And I say, my captain is discriminating against me because I'm gay. Okay. I'm going to give you a referral to the McNicholas firm. Talk to them. So they put these resources in place so that they can provide this as a service. And then the copper gets, it's free. I agree. They will agree to pay me for 2 hours. I've never taken it. It's just whatever. It's what a waste, right? Mm-hmm. So it's free. And on those, that I can end up talking to that copper for 15 minutes. I could end up talking to him for 3 or 4 hours over 2 weeks. Okay, get me this. Get me the investigation. No, I need to see this. Send me your personnel. So there's something at LAP called the Teams report, which is your whole history in one place. Send me that. I need to see that. Okay, no. Send me the interview. Okay, I'm kind of close, but because they record the interview under POBRA, right? Yeah. I don't have it. Okay, get your rep to email it to me, and I'll have it transcribed because I'm not going to listen to it. So I send it to a certified shorthand reporter and take hours, weeks. Sometimes I'll vet a case and say, we just can't do it. So it's a resource. So tying this again into everything we're talking about, the smaller POAs, that's something they should do. They should have panel-approved lawyers for IOD comp, for if you're getting divorced, how many coppers get divorced? Lose the boat, lose the jet ski, right? You always buy the coppers always have the jet skis, the RVs, and the boats, and they always go bye-bye in the divorce.
Yeah. Listen to that. He's not kidding.
No. And then, of course, the wrangling over the pension. But the way that the POA can say, look, that's really not our field. I can help you grieve your annual. I can help you grieve this. I can help do this admin appeal. Right? I can talk about your change of watch, your shift to watch. But talk to these people, right? Go talk to this lawyer. Go talk to that lawyer. And then now what you've got at your POA is you've got a resource. So that if they think they have an issue and they call your POA, you can say, hey, just call Smith, call McNicholas, call Jones. And now you at least have a high degree of confidence that they're getting the information they need without your input, because it's not your area. It would be like me commenting to somebody on how to serve a search warrant. I don't know how to serve a search warrant. I've only seen it done on TV. I've never actually served a search warrant.
Well, in 2023, the way that SWAT teams do it now is it's super simple. You just roll up, you park in front of someone's house, you get on a loudspeaker,
hey, easy,
and you just say,
easy on SWAT.
So-and-so, come out. We have a search warrant. There you go.
Then we have to bring the dog and let the dog bark a little bit.
All the SWAT guys are listening to this are like, screw you. No, we don't. We do dynamic entries.
Yeah.
Anyways, so go ahead.
You talk about resources and stuff, and I just briefly want to circle back because I don't want to forget about this, but your Instagram, some of the stuff that we talked about here is California specific, but other stuff, it spreads across the country. So you're using your Instagram, which you did kind of skim over that as a resource.
So what we started to do is I told the people, I want to just get these tidbits out because, Instagram is great, but it's limited, right? No one's going to Instagram to listen to what we're doing here today.
Right.
the idea is that I talk about lie barger. What's being lie bargered? Some people don't know. Most people should what being lie bargered is. Lie barger is the case in California that balances your constitutional right to your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and your department's right to investigate. And so getting lie bargered is the series of questions and answers that you go through where your agency compels your statement, but it can't be used against you under the Fifth Amendment, right? You preserves both. So I did one on lie barger, and I did one on you're entitled to have a rep. And I had this list of things like 50, 60 topics to try and get thumbnails out so that we've been up for 4 weeks. There's almost 1,000 followers. We haven't really done a push yet. This is probably the first big push right now that we're doing. And it's like, hey, Mark, you could see it and say, hey, well, I'm off the job now, but I've got my buddy. I think he's having this problem. And you forward him the link and say, hey, you might want to look into this, like this lie barger thing or this rep thing or this what discrimination is, right? I have several little bites about what we've been talking about, but because it has to be, bite-sized.
It has to be short form content.
Right, short form content. So that is really, even before the Instagram, as I was telling you, my office gets 5 to 25 calls a week from around the state. I have 5 or 6 people that all they do is take the call, get the facts, and then brief the lawyer, and then a lawyer calls everybody back. You always talk to a lawyer. That's kind of the commitment I made. Is that doesn't happen on the PI side because those are different animals. It's easier to vet PI cases. Just
personal injury,
yeah. But law enforcement employees say, okay, well, wait a second. They took your watch away, but was it a temporary assignment? Was it a loan? Okay, well, who else was there? Well, who got it? Well, what was their seniority? Well, wait a second. Well, why do you think this? Well, what did your watch? There's so many nuances because not only is it an employment case, but then you have a paramilitary organization layered on top of it. With then you have POBRA issues, and which create all kinds of aids. POBRA, very important. I would take a pause. Every one of your listeners, there's a firefighter bill of rights too. Okay, it's not as robust as the peace officer bill of rights. It's not long. POBRA is not long. Every one of your listeners should read it. I can't remember the publication. Maybe Paul does. I have a pocket POBRA guide that I give to every one of my lawyers that works on police officer cases. And that's not our main area, right? I'm not a POBRA lawyer. Like, I don't go and sit with you as a rep. But I know when there are factual violations of POBRA, I make those acts of retaliation or adverse acts in my employment case.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're not following POBRA on your situation, and we think it's because you reported misconduct, because your lieutenant is squeezing your female partner's butt and telling wiener jokes, and now they're kind of skirting around your POBRA rights, that's an adverse employment action. So as an employment lawyer, I have that experience with POBRA. I know what it provides. I know that they can't use your recorded statement and just read from it in a courtroom. It's a very nuanced area. They can impeach you with it only. They can't use it in a civil proceeding. Most lawyers don't know that. Anyway, we won't get there. But your listeners should read it, and not just once. Get the little pocket one, put it on the can. When you just read it while you're on the can and move on.
Yeah, it's your career,
right? And this little pocket guide, it's like this burgundy front, and then it has like in the back little case, like 3 lines on a case that has interpreted it. This is what this means. This is what this means. This is what this means. It's fantastic.
That's what I need.
And you know what I'll do is when I get home, I will email you a picture of it. I'll text you a picture of it. I have nothing to do with the book. I don't make any money on it. In fact, when I do speaking engagements with officers who are league reps, it's about $20 a pop. I will buy it and I hand it out to all of them. That's how important I think it is.
Oh, good for you for doing that.
You're awesome.
Yeah. Well, you get what you give. And as I said, a little personal note, I'm the last of 7 kids. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, as were all my brothers and sisters. My parents were both born and raised in Los Angeles. 3 of my grandparents were both born and raised in Los Angeles. My grandfather, my father, my 2 brothers, and I all went to the same high school, Loyola High School in Los Angeles. My grandfather was class of 29. My youngest son will graduate from Loyola High School 100 years after his great-grandfather. Why am I telling you that? Because that's my home, right? That's where I'm raising my children. and probably my grandchildren. And the LAPD is my police department, and LAFD is my fire department. And they're the ones that help and protect me. So I also kind of have a personal emotional stake in it, in that I want the best, most robust police department there can be. I think, I had as a note on here, I think we should have 20 or 30,000 sworn police officers. I think that, this is from my personal experience, watching the LAPD from the inside, okay, not drinking the Kool-Aid, with a very critical eye, since 1999. And I get a lot of candid insight from a lot of people, from a lot of quarters. And what has happened is that the LAPD, because they're understaffed and have been, even at 10,000 officers, it's understaffed. It is a triage police force, meaning it's the nurse that you go from bleeding patient to bleeding patient because you don't have time to sit down and say, hey, how you feeling? Let's talk. Like the old days before insurance companies ran amok on health insurance, where you'd actually just go see your doctor and talk to him or her for an hour, half an hour. And then find out what's going on with the family. Hey, how's your mom? I remember when I was a kid in high school, how's your mom and dad? Okay, is your dad feeling okay? Yeah, how's that thing? Okay, it's hard. How about your brothers? Anything with them? You'd have a conversation. And when you don't have enough staff, you have to go to the burning buildings first, both figuratively and actually, right? And which is why in the last 5 juries I picked, starting last year, this trial coming up against LAPD will be my 7th trial in 17 months. Jurors in every panel were critical of LAPD response time. Because you ask, when you're representing a police officer against the department, that's something you voir dire. That's something you talk to the jury about. Like, you got to see what's going on with your jurors. And of course, I can't say, well, that's not their fault, right? But I'm telling you that because the complaint is, somebody smashed into my car and stole my laptop and took the police 4 hours to get there. Well, of course it did. Because they're understaffed. The city of Los Angeles is 474 square miles. We have 4.2 million residents of the city of Los Angeles. We only have 9,300 sworn police officers. Well, 10% of that's administration. Deputy chiefs and captains aren't out fighting crime. They can't, right? As we said, the captains are running divisions of 400 people. Well, there's 21 geographical divisions. That's 2 captains per division. That's, okay, there you go. There's 42 people off the street. Well, there's deputy chiefs not on the street. So why this was the big paradox of defund. There's nothing wrong with trying to make the mousetrap better. In fact, it is incumbent upon us as a civilized society. The greatest thing, and I say this to juries, the greatest thing about this country is that we always believe our best days are ahead of us. Always. When John F. Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon in 10 years, we did it in under 10 years, right? That's just us. And I have seen this in Los Angeles and what has happened, at least in our little experiment of my lifetime. When social programs get underfunded, it always gets dumped on 911. Mental health is a huge thing, right? Yeah. And the mental health crisis is out of control, as is the drug crisis. And they're interwoven. And so we have, I'm going to tell you this, I tell my coppers now that we've talked for a bit, I'm your only and best liberal friend. And you need one in your life.
I guess you're it.
That's me. That's I tell my cop clients, I'm like, now you can tell everybody that you have a liberal friend. And they laugh. But because we don't take care of mental health and drug addiction, they end up on the street and then they end up police problems. Well, police officers aren't trained to deal with addicts and addiction. They're trained to deal with a high criminal, meaning a criminal that's, somehow out of their mind, so that all this stuff gets dumped back on 911. It's like, well, wait a second. That's not a policing function. Yeah. That's a mental health function. And then that leads to a parade of horribles, which is why I say the LAPD needs 20,000, 25,000, and every geographical division should have a cadre of mental health professionals that are on the watches. So it's always staffed. So if there's a mental health issue, that unit rolls and has police as backup. So that the men and women in the uniforms with the guns and the badges aren't the ones that are talking to the person who's probably not doing well. They're in the background in case something happens. And then the mental health professionals, they're like, how much better would that be? Right? This is why I said this was the absolute paradox, the wrong-headed thinking of defund. It is you incorporate these things. So the police can be police officers and mental health professionals can be mental health professionals. And I don't know how I got started on this, but in this conversation, but I know how I got started on it. And
looking at Mark and then mental health.
Yeah, well, it was just a long beard.
I got it. Yeah.
Well, I was looking at your notes and going, well, it must be on your notes because you're very organized.
So, but it is part of why I love what I do, is because that's my police department. And as I said, I don't joke about it, I'm like, I'm a wuss, man. I am not going to go tackle somebody. I am not going to put somebody in a standing modified. I am not doing felony stops. No, thank you. God bless you for doing it. I'll just be the lawyer, and you guys can be the police officers.
Well, I have a question, and that is if there's an employee or a cop or somebody who's first responder out there listening to this, and they are at their wit's end and they have issues going on at their department, can you just provide a little bit of insight of when you think that they should come talk to you?
So,
or let things just...
Okay. That's a great question, and I'll answer it this way. When you feel a lump in your chest, you don't wait to see if it goes away to talk to the doctor. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing. I don't know, you were playing baseball or softball and you got hit. When you call us or you call any lawyer, that doesn't mean you're filing a lawsuit. You're just getting legal advice. And of the thousands of people that call us, I probably take 1 or 2 cases every month or every other month. And that's not because all the others are not good cases legally. As we were talking, we have a very candid conversation with the officer. Is this something you should do? Are you married? Do you have children? Can you afford to be without a paycheck? What happens if this goes sideways? These are all important considerations. But if somebody believes that there are employment issues on the job, call us or call whoever your POA provides. You get advice, and then you just, you took that right there, and now you have some advice to lean on. So you're just not winging it. That is my overall advice. Having more information, not bad. Having more information, that's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hesitate to even call an attorney just to get advice. They're like, well, I don't think I need to do that yet.
Yeah, but you can do that privately.
Yeah.
And you might get an answer that maybe you weren't looking for, or you were, and it might make you feel better and more comfortable. And I think that, I don't even know where I'm going other than I think you need to do it because it'll probably help you.
Well, funny you say that because...
Wait, is it on your notes?
No, it's not on my notes.
Sorry, I'm just kidding.
It's not on my notes. I'll be forever the guy with the notes. So, no, coppers will call me and I'll say, yeah, I get you. Yeah, your captain's totally hosing you, 100%. I know it. You know it. I said, I know because I've been doing this for 23 years. You know because you've been a cop for 12 years, but there ain't no way I'm going to be able to prove it. So it's not worth your time. It's just, we're going to lose, and then it's going to be worse for you. But I'm telling you, I hear what you're saying, and I'll take it off. Yeah, that's wrong. That shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. But we're never going to be able to win this case. And what they say is, you know what? I just feel better knowing that. Thank you for being straight with me. Thank you for telling. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to give you a bum steer. I got to give you what I think my 23 years has taught me. So
I even think that advice alone might actually you might fill someone's head with that, and they get that clarity a little bit. Like they think they're going to have this case, but then you're straight up telling them you don't have a case because we just can't win this. That might, I don't know, change somebody's perspective of, okay, well, how do I make this situation better then? And think, I guess, more in a positive way instead of a negative way.
Correct.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes great sense because somebody will call me and they'll say, well, this is happening and I think it's because of this. And what do I do? And should I sue him? I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. All right, what is your goal? What do you want to do? You just want to get this, right? You want to get the assignment. Oh, yeah, of course I want to. Okay, go on your merry way. Yes, okay. So here's my recommendation. follow up an email with this person, or go sit down and talk to your captain and just say, hey, I really want to get this. Just tell me what you think I need to do to be better. I'll give them see if you can't approach it in a positive way to head it off at the pass so that you don't have to need me.
Yeah.
I give that kind of advice all the time because while I'm not a police officer, I have the benefit of having reviewed thousands of cases and looking at thousands of personnel packages and looking at thousands of secret memos and how these decisions get made and don't get made. And, I'm not an oracle, but I can give you pretty sound advice that it may not carry the day, but it'll be helpful.
Well, the advice that you've given us, we've all learned a lot today. I'm blown away by all this. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming in here and working with us and sharing us. We have to have you back.
It is my pleasure. And as I said, I'm a firm believer. You guys go out there and do what you do, and makes me thrilled to do what I do.
Let's mention your Instagram again. We're going to put it on the show notes in the description, everything on YouTube. So if you're not watching this on YouTube, on audio, it'll be in the description. But what is your Instagram? And then make sure you guys are following his Instagram that they just created, because they are giving you free education on this stuff that you have to know. I mean, you got to know this stuff.
So it's at First Responders, plural, Law. At First Responders Law.
Okay.
The webpage is www.McNicholas Law, McNicholas law.com. If you think you have an issue, though, just call the office. 310-474-1582. Your case will get reviewed. I have a very robust staff for this exact purpose. Every first responder that calls gets to talk to a lawyer, period. Now, it's a multi-step process because you call and we do conflict waivers, because I talk to so many people I have to have police officers sign conflict waivers, because I've probably spoken to maybe 10 to 20% of current working LAPD officers.
Jeez.
Uh-huh.
LAPD is your best friend.
So it's just because they're so big.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the basic information taken down, and then that'll get put into a proper memo, and it'll go to the lawyer, and the lawyer will call you and walk through your whole situation with you.
All right.
You're providing an amazing service for people, for first responders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for flying down here. We do need to get you back to the airport so you guys don't miss your flight. Yeah. Paul's over here sweating.
I know. He's like, wrap it up, guys.
Yeah.
I think Paul's just playing Sudoku on his phone.
Yeah. Hey, grab the skateboard. Let's show everyone the skateboard that you guys gifted us. This thing is cool. And tell us a little bit about this thing. So we'll show the camera here on our end.
Okay. So this was a gift to me from one of my other clients who's still on the job at Newton Division. Mikey Fernandez, a shout out. Oh, okay. Yeah. Shout out to you, Mikey. So I brought this up for the fellas so that they could show it to all their listeners. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to talk. Mikey's one of my favorites of all time. He is a saint. He's the one that on his own down in South LA gets turkeys and puts together Thanksgiving dinners for people in the projects every year. Nice. And then on his own works with people. We give donations where they give like socks and underwear and sweats and blankets for Christmas. Because I asked him, what do they need? He goes, they don't need toys. They need life's basics. And that's what he does, bless you, every year. Anyway, Mikey, thank you.
Dude, thank you,
Yeah,
Mikey.
thanks, Mikey.
Thank you for doing a good job, man. All right, guys. Well, listen, that was great. A lot of information. Again, follow the Instagram page. Go to the website. He gave you the phone number. We'll also put that in there if you guys think you have a case. You guys can drop a call. We'll get you back to the airport. Any words of wisdom on your end, Mark?
You're asking for my words of wisdom?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out to an attorney and consult.
Yeah.
It might just be enough to make your day better.
And the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I'll take my notes with me.